Are you struggling to run 100 balls in straight pool? Maybe your goal is just to run 50 balls or just to get through 2 racks. My goal is to run 200 balls for the first time. We are all at different places, but on the same journey. This video is about analyzing your play to find your failure points and what to do about it. Determining what to do about it is not for the weak of heart. Are you seriously ready to stop doing the same things over and over, expecting different results? If you are, let's get to work. Hello, my name is Bob. Welcome to A Short Stop on Pool. In my book, A Short Stop on Straight Pool, I discuss plotting your high run attempts to create your own probability distribution curve. Somewhere on this chart is your average run, and at the far end is your lifetime high run. I have often wondered if every player's curve will be similar in shape while charting different run lengths. Well, now, for the first time in history, the data for 6 different professional pool players and myself is available for study. Over the last few months, Shane Van Boening, Ruslan Chynakov, Earl Strickland, Jason Shaw, Tony Robles, and John Schmidt have live streamed some of their high run attempts. In a moment, we will compare each player's probability distribution curve and analyze their failure points, what ended each run, to see what we can learn. Real quick, I've been asked what's the difference between a 100 ball run and a 200 ball run? And why do some players have such difficulty getting to 100 balls? Well, here's the way I see it. A lot of pool players are good shooters, and if they keep at it, they can run 3 or 4 racks in a row before they run into a failure point. And then they'll run a 5 or a 10 or a 14 and a few 28s. And then maybe if they keep at it, they'll run another 3 or 4 racks. Well, if they keep working it, sooner or later, they're going to have a day where they run 3 or 4 racks, and then they happen to make some hero recovery shot and immediately run another 3 or 4 racks. So they'll get close to or over 100 points. So what they've done is they've linked 2 short runs together by making a hero shot. So you can get to 100 balls that way. And I'm sure that a few of the 100 ball runs that I've made are that type of run. But you're never going to run 200 balls or even 150 balls that way, because you can't get lucky enough to link that many short runs together. So it's this kind of performance that leads a lot of players into believing that all they need is some more straight pool knowledge. So they acquire more knowledge, but their numbers don't improve. So straight pool knowledge is important, but evidently that's not all it takes. Let's find out. Let's dive into the data. The numbers you're about to see do not include every single run by every player, except for Ruslan and Tony, and they don't include Jason's 714. I may have made some errors, but I think there's enough correct data that we can draw some valid conclusions. Let's start with Shane Van Boening. Compiling his numbers into a chart looks like this. Along the bottom is the number of racks of balls pocketed during each attempt. Along the left is the number of times that number of racks was pocketed. So for example, Shane ran 14 balls or less 7 times, and he ran between 295 and 308 balls 2 times. We know from the stats that both of those runs were 308 balls. Now I'll ask you, does Shane's chart look like this one? It is similar in that the beginning of the curve is higher than the high run at the end, but then it rises to a peak much sooner than my chart and then descends along a curve to the high run. The difference is that the peak of the curve is not your average run length. Shane's BPI for this set of runs was actually 75. No, the peak of the curve represents the run length at which you are most likely to encounter a failure point. Here are the numbers for the 6 sessions that I recorded for Shane Van Boening. Feel free to hit pause here if you want to take some time to digest these numbers. Let's take a look at the next player, Earl Strickland. Interestingly, the peak of Earl's curve is in the first rack, and then we see a second peak at about 13 racks before descending to the final high run. The next player, Ruslan Chynakov, had a very short session and only had 9 attempts. But look at these numbers. 8 of his 9 attempts went into the 8th rack or more. In fact, he had 2 runs of 266 balls. Now, this is a very small data set, so maybe this is an aberration, but those are pretty impressive numbers. The next player is the current record holder, Jason Shaw. This data does not include his record run of 714. That would just be a single data point over at the end. But it's interesting to see that he's equally likely to end a run in the first and second innings. And then can we make a case for a second peak in his curve between racks 17 and 21? Tony Robles had a very short session as well, but the peak of his curve is in the third rack. And finally, we have Mr. 626, John Schmidt. This is a fairly large data set, almost 5,000 balls pocketed. And again, the peak of his curve is in the second rack. And again, do I see a second peak before it tails off to his high run? Here I tried estimating the curve for each player with a large enough data set. You might think I'm getting a little creative with my drawing, but there might be something to the idea that when a player gets for them what is deep into a run, they maybe focus more or become more motivated to keep the run going. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, so how do my numbers compare with the pros? Well, here is the embarrassing truth. I wish I could say this chart was from a year ago, but this is about a month ago. I managed a high run of 98 in 8 sessions, but the glaring and obvious difference is here. Way too many runs, proportionately, ending in the first and second inning. I think the lesson here is if you want to run more balls in straight pool, you don't put your efforts into running a lot more balls. You put your efforts into running 42 balls more often. You put your efforts into reducing the failures in the first and second racks. Because if you can get over 28 points more often, then more of those runs could become a longer run and therefore a 100-ball run. Now, obviously, I don't measure up to these top pros, but I remember when my BPI was around 10, and I was really happy when I got it up to 12 and then 15. Your numbers are going to look different than mine. You might not track number of racks on the bottom of your chart, but you might track the balls up to 50. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you work on reducing your failure points to lower the peak of the curve at the left side of your chart. And so I found it quite interesting as we compare these 4 top champions who have a large data set. Look at how much lower the left side of the curve is for John Schmidt. And one of these 4 sessions, he had a wireless microphone on and was talking to the spectators. Okay, let's dig deeper into the failure points. As I recorded each of these sessions, I made a note on whether the run ended on a miss or a scratch, and then I made a subjective comment on what caused that miss or the scratch. From that data, I compiled this chart of statistics. Here you can more easily compare each player's BPI, for example. I recorded how many times each player's run ended on a miss or a scratch. And from that, calculated a miss to scratch ratio. My ratio is the highest at 16. Ruslan's is the lowest at 0.8, but remember his is a very small data set. Earl and Tony are tied at 8. Then you can see Jason, John, and Shane are all very close from 3 to 4. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this is obvious. I didn't need this chart to tell me that they miss less. But that's not the point here. Think about the fact that every single straight pool run attempt that you make is going to come to an end, and it will end on either a miss or a scratch. What this number doesn't tell you is whether that failure point was a forced error, that is something uncontrollable that happened on the table, or an unforced error, such as playing bad position. So this miss to scratch ratio represents an all-around more consistent and controlled game. The next section of the chart dives into that more deeply. This section looks at runs that ended on a missed shot. First, just a generic miss, then a miss that was caused by a position error, a bad angle on the break shot, a generic miss on a break shot when they had a good angle, and a forced error when there was really no shot. The bottom section of the chart counts the run attempts that ended on a scratch, whether a generic scratch, a scratch on a break shot, a miscue, or some type of fluke scratch that is not the fault of the player. I'll leave it to you to study these numbers, but leave a comment about what you see is most telling. For example, what I noticed is that Shane's miss to position error ratio is about 4 to 1, while John Schmidt's miss to position error ratio is much less. And finally, I calculated the percentage of each player's run attempts that ended in 3 racks or less or greater than 7 racks. I found it very interesting that the only players whose percentage of runs over 7 racks is greater are Ruslan Chainikov and John Schmidt. And you can see this in their distribution curves because their curves are much flatter, which results in the two highest BPIs of all the players. So what does all this mean? In my opinion, the lesson is that in order to run more balls in straight pool, you need to stop trying to run more balls in straight pool. What you need to work on is to reduce your misses, play better position for the purpose of flattening your curve and reducing the number of runs that end in the first or second inning. This means you need to work on your fundamentals, and I'm going to say it, drills. Don't look at these charts and think, oh, these pros, they play so good. Instead, notice that while trying to run a lot of balls, they miss and scratch too. It's just that they've refined their skills to reduce their quantity of failure points. In other words, they are more consistent. Consistency is the single underlying message of this video. Flattening your curve means becoming more consistent, and consistency means pocketing balls and controlling the cue ball better than you do today. Remember what I said earlier? Are you seriously ready to stop doing the same things over and over, expecting different results? For the remainder of this video, I will give you suggestions of what to do. Determining what to do about it is not for the weak of heart, but not how. The how would make this video about 10 hours long. The first step of getting to your straight pool goal is take it seriously. Any player can learn to slam balls into the pockets and run a rack of 9-ball once in a while, but navigating a rack of straight pool and then running multiple racks of straight pool in a row takes a serious attitude and a willingness to analyze and refine every single aspect of your game. Improve your cue delivery. Your fundamentals are not as good as you think they are. Mine weren't 20 years ago, even though I could win a 9-ball tournament. Mine weren't 12 years ago when I won my straight pool league. Mine weren't 2 years ago when I ran 124 balls and 109 balls and so on. I'm not bragging. One of the great things about pool is that people can have success and have fun at any skill level. The point is, no matter how much success you've had in the past, your fundamentals need work. Pros work on their fundamentals on a daily basis. Do you? I can teach you how to juggle, but until you spend hours by yourself practicing, you will not be able to juggle. In the same way, straight pool patterns and decision making is knowledge that must be acquired, and then they must be practiced often in concert with working on your fundamentals. It's a never-ending process. Track your runs, calculate your daily and cumulative BPI, identify your failure points, and then practice them. Set a BPI goal. If your current BPI is 5, set a goal for 8. If your current BPI is 10, set a goal for 15. My current BPI is around 20, and my goal is now 30, and so on. Stop trying to set a new personal high run as often as you do now. At least 80% of your straight pool time should be spent on drills and fundamentals. Reward your completion of your practice routines with the opportunity to spend one practice session attempting a new high run. Every aspiring player today should video record their practice. A cell phone is all you need. Then review your work, look for the cause of your failure points, and work on them. Practice your weaknesses, not your strength. Take lessons from a qualified instructor. I'm approached for advice nearly every time I'm in the pool hall, but what you get for free will never approach the detail and insightfulness of a lesson that you have paid for. And finally, I will demonstrate some practice routines and drills that will help your straight pool game no matter what level you're at. In the same way that you'll never learn to play your best 9-ball by just randomly throwing the balls out and then trying to run out, you need to add more structure to your practice in order to learn to play your best straight pool. I like to break down a rack of straight pool into 4 components, and I call them the 4 ifs. If you execute a good break shot, and if you deal with any trouble balls, and if you don't miss and play good position, and if you execute a good end pattern and get on the next break shot, you've run a rack of straight pool. Practice each of the 4 ifs separately. For the break shot, mark the table so you can repeat each shot. Start softly and then build up your speed so that you can hit the shot accurately with break shot force. Often the cue ball will scratch in the opposite corner pocket. Be sure to practice the shot with follow and withdraw. Review your video so you can see what causes a miss. When you're ready to practice with a rack of balls, start softly, then add more speed, then aim higher on the cue ball, then a very firm follow stroke, and a hard draw stroke. Own the shot before moving the break ball or cue ball starting position. You can practice dealing with trouble shots in a similar fashion, such as this 3-ball cluster. How can you open this cluster while getting a shot on one of your insurance balls? Experiment hitting the cluster on the bottom, the middle, and the top, and at different speeds. Experiment in the same way to practice manufacturing a break ball. As we learned earlier in this video, the pros miss shots too. They just don't miss as often as you and me. There are hundreds of drills to help improve your shot making, and you should be practicing them on a weekly basis. But remember, it's not just pocketing the ball, it's also learning to play good position so you don't need to shoot a difficult shot. And pocketing the ball and playing good position both come about as a result of refining your fundamentals. This is a process that never ends. Use experimentation to practice your end patterns as well. Here I've set up a 4-ball scenario and I'll shoot it 6 different ways. Always shoot the break ball at the end to make it part of your rehearsal. Next I'll try shooting the first 2 balls in opposite order. How about using the side pocket ball as the K2 ball? Next is the same thing, but use the other low ball as the key ball. On this attempt, my position on the side pocket ball went too far, so I experiment with a recovery shot around the key ball, which goes too far, and I have to make another recovery shot to get on the break ball. On the last attempt, I play for a different angle on the key ball to go 2 rails around my break ball. I didn't show you all of my failed attempts here, but that's the point. Only by failing do you learn what works through experimentation. Finally, I want to show you 3 practice routines that are sure to improve your straight pool consistency. Break a rack wide open, and your goal is to clear the table, but before you shoot each shot, you must call the next ball and pocket that you will shoot. You're going to be surprised at how difficult this is the first few times you try it. Remember, I'm just telling you what to practice in this video. Later, I should produce a video that describes this and other routines in more detail. Next, every aspiring straight pool player should be familiar with and indeed proficient at the game of equal offense. You can find some slight variations in the rules online, but basically, you break a rack open and try to score 20 points. You can take ball in hand if you wish, clear the table, setting up for a break shot, and then run 5 more balls. The ultimate goal is a perfect score of 100 points in 5 innings. And finally is a practice routine of my own invention, 7-ball straight pool. Rack 6 balls, set up a break shot, and see how many points you can run. Immediately after making your break shot, you are in the end pattern. This routine is excellent end pattern practice combined with soft and medium soft high ball break shots and controlling the cue ball off from those break shots. This is great for developing your consistency as you become more accustomed to shooting one break shot after another after another. In fact, a 102-ball run playing 7-ball straight pool is 17 racks. I know you can't wait to go practice, so let's summarize what we've covered today. Pro players miss shots too, but are more consistent overall. Flatten your distribution curve by reducing your failure points early in your run attempts. Progress is slow and incremental. Track your BPI and miss to scratch ratio and set goals. Stop playing to only achieve a high run. The brute force method is unproductive. Limited high run attempts between practice sessions. Record your attempts and practice your weaknesses, your failure points. Set a goal to pocket 50 or 100 balls in as few innings as possible, then work to improve your best score. Practice the 4 ifs. Break down straight pool to its components and practice each one separately. Experiment so you can learn from what doesn't work. Every single practice session is also about practicing your fundamentals. Rehearse and refine your fundamentals on a consistent basis to achieve consistency. Shoot practice drills and routines to build consistency and confidence for your high run attempts. Remember that perfection in the game of pool is impossible. Enjoy the journey never ends.